good evening, good evening, good evening. A pleasant Monday evening to you all. My name is Annette Reid. If you haven't met me, yes, I am. Proud daughter of Belcastle, Portland, Jamaica, currently residing in the United States. And tonight, I welcome you to Crack Edges Speak, a platform for purposeful and healing conversations. Thank you wherever you are. Please let us know. And again, thank you for joining us. If you watch us on the replay, just hashtag replay so I know you caught up with us afterwards. So thank you so much. Before I go any further, again, thank you for your messages of encouragement. I really appreciate them. Don't forget to click, like, share. We are building this platform, so I see some people are really doing that. Corey, thank you so much. I see your work of liking and sharing this platform, this page. So I appreciate you very much, my dear. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Did I forget anything? No. Well, tonight, this month, by the way, welcome to May. Welcome to May. For me, May represents a lot of rain. You know, growing up in Jamaica, we always have a lot of rain in May. So welcome to May. And this month, we are talking about mother stories in May. So for the month of May, right here on Crack Edges, we will be speaking about and sharing our experiences about mother stories about motherhood, our experiences with our mothers, our experiences with us as mothers, and also the experience not to be a mother. But tonight, I want to welcome, first of all, I was supposed to have another guest on here tonight, and she is under the weather. And I understand, because if you hear me a little nasally, it's because I'm fighting with allergies, which usually happen this time of year. So I understand that. But tonight, I welcome one of my favorite people. Oh my goodness, I love her so much. She's always in my corner, always very supportive. We share DNA. She's the feisty one. Ladies and gentlemen, everybody out there in cyber world, welcome my beautiful cousin, Miss Dorothy Reid. I know she's going to say Dorothy, but there you are. Welcome.
Hey, how are you?
I am doing well on this Monday evening. You know, today's Monday, so I had a lot going on because I was off for a while, from the driving school. And today I had to really catch up. And there's a lot of moving parts, which I'm very excited about. So thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be on here tonight, right?
Anything for you.
Oh, I know. Mwah. Thank you. Well, I just want to dive right into it. And that is, we're talking about motherhood and the decision to be a mother. All right. And this is a hot topic for me, because I was reading an article in the week, and it was about a woman who decided that she did not want to be a mother. She did not want to adopt. She just did not want to be a mother. And a lot of people on the thread was very supportive of her, but then you had a lot of nasty comments on the thread as well. And I'm saying, I didn't understand that, because every woman gets to decide, right? Absolutely. Especially in this age, in this day and age, every woman gets to decide if she wants to be a mother or not, right? But tonight, I'm talking about the decision to be a mother. All right. For some of us, and I can speak for myself, for some of us who make the decision to be a mother, it did not come lightly. For me, I struggled with the decision to be a mother. And I know it was because of my past. It was because I was afraid that I would not be good at it. I remember sitting in high school planning that I did not want to be poor with children. I would always tell myself that, don't be poor with children. And another thing I would tell myself while I was in high school is, if you have two, have your tubes tied. I would constantly tell myself that. And at the time, I did not know who I would, obviously have a child with. But at that age, to show you the tension in my mind and my world of being afraid to be a mother. And I knew that I wanted to have an education. It was very important to me to be educated. It was very important to go past high school, right? And to be able to take care of myself. I joke around sometimes and say the reason I came to the United States is so that I could get educated and buy good shoes.
Shoes are a must. Have to have shoes. Have to
I
have
told
shoes.
myself that, but looking back, I remember just the fear in the back of my mind that I did not want to be responsible for another life. But I was very maternal. And I'm a very nurturing person. I was always very nurturing, even as a young child. So just imagine that dynamic of being nurturing and fighting against that because of the fear that I did not want to be poor with children, or I did not want to mess it up. I did not want to have a child that came back to me and say, you are responsible for my horrible childhood, right? So I would always put off being a mother while inside I wanted to. And so I kept focused on education, taking one course, getting a certificate, getting another certificate, right? And then denying myself that I really wanted this. Because there was a time when I would kind of tell myself, okay, I don't want to be a mother anymore. But that was not true, right?
That was not true.
It was not true. It was my fear driving me. And I was living in Brooklyn in my 20s. And there was a neighbor. He was a young guy living next to me from Haiti. And I guess he was watching me coming and going because I was working at the publishing company at the time. And one day he said to me, I think you're going to be a good mother, right? And I looked at him like, who are you? Because I hardly knew him. He was my neighbor, but it's just like, hi and bye, right? And here I was, and he's telling me something that I want to run away from, right? And then he said to me one day, why don't you have a child for me? And I thought, and then shortly after that, he moved from Brooklyn to Long Island. So I was like, okay, that's over and done. And after that, I never really dwell in the place of being a mother for a very long time, for years. I even tell myself, you'll make a great auntie, but I never really, consciously thought about being a mother because my fear was much bigger than my desire, right? But my desire was there.
I think for me, I really didn't think about it. I grew up, I was raised as an only child, so I never really thought about it. It was when I got older in my 20s, I really even thought about it because I never wanted to get married. That was something I never wanted to do. So, you think about marriage and you think about children. And so I never wanted to get married. I didn't get married. I had a life partner for 43 years until, he passed. But when we started dating, I thought about children. I wanted a family. I just didn't want to get married. Unfortunately for me, I met somebody who our values were the same, our thoughts were the same. There was never a fear. My fear was like yours, not wanting to have children, not be able to provide for them and give them all the things my parents gave me. So I wanted to make sure I got a good education. I wanted to make sure I got a really good job. So I had money and I could raise my children and I could give them what they needed. I also didn't want to have my children very close. I wanted to have two. That was it. I wasn't going to have any more. And I wanted to be able to have them far apart so I could provide all the things. Because my largest thing I thought about was, how do I put two children through school at the same time?
Mm-hmm.
Because my parents did that and they paid for it. So I grew up thinking, I have to do that. I have to be able to put my children through school. And how would I do it if I had them very close together? It was going to be very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So I never really had the fear. And then when I decided I was going to, it happened and that was it. And then we waited, and what we thought would be, like 6 years apart, and they ended up being 9 years apart. But that worked out fine because we were able to take care of them as individuals. And then as they got older, collectively, was still able to provide all the things that I got provided with as a child. So, and I also worried about, would I be a good mother too?
Right.
As well. But I also, one of the things that I knew I wasn't going to do is raise my children the way I was raised, in that we did not have conversations.
Right.
There's so many things our parents didn't say to us, didn't tell us, didn't talk to us about. We were supposed to learn these through osmosis. And I thought that was crazy. So I thought I would parent always when I had my children. Doesn't matter how old they are. If they needed me, I'd be there. If they needed advice, I'd be there. And I would have constant conversation, which is kind of what I did.
Yeah. When I was working in Manhattan at the publishing company, I took a parenting class.
Mm.
And I remember when I showed up and they asked you, why are you here? And I was like, I just want to learn.
Yeah.
Because I was trying to absorb as much as I can to see if I am designed to be a parent. You know what I mean? Like, and another thing that I had, which was kind of driven by the fear also, was I wanted to have enough finances to take care of a child. And
Absolutely.
as I got older, I realized that you really never have enough finances to take care of a child, right?
Never.
You can have stability. The one thing that I've accomplished in having a child is I knew that I wanted her to have a stable place to live. Whatever I did, he or she they were going to have a stable place to live. That was non-negotiable. Right. And that's one of the reasons why I fight so hard to be in this house with my daughter after my divorce, because I did not want to move her in boxes, the way I had to move in boxes from one place back to my mother's house. So I knew that I had to fight hard to keep her here. And the joy of her coming in the door and saying, Mommy, I'm home, right, is worth everything.
Absolutely. But those are the stabilities, right? If you're a parent, you have to provide that stability. And the stability is shelter and food and clothes.
Mm-hmm.
And then as they go through school, if you're living like we're living in North America, then elementary school is free, right up until high school. And then after that, it's university. So you have to be able to prepare yourself over that 18 years as to how you're going to finance that. So those are the things that we always want to be able to provide. We have to be able to provide. And I think that is probably where the fear comes from is, am I going to be able to provide the things that are going to make their life meaningful and comfortable, right? So, for me, I grew up in a house with a large extended family. So there was never the need for anything. There was always somebody who I could go to who was going to give me whatever it was. And so when I moved to North America and I realized and I had children, we had an extended family. Everybody was still working. My mother was still working because she wasn't, retired or anything. So was my dad. So was my husband's mother. Then I had my cousins. And so we always had that. So the benefit of being able to have an extended family, that helps you out. But if you're in a situation where you don't have that, then it all falls in your lap. And so you have to be able to do those things. And it's very hard. My always big thing is, as I watch my children grow up, and I'd watch young kids, they eat a lot. And I just couldn't imagine a kid looking at me and say, "Can I have a cookie?" And I go, "I don't have any."
Yeah.
"Well, can we go to the store?" "Well, I don't have any money."
Yeah.
That would kill me. And that to me would be the hardest thing is shelter and food.
Yeah.
Clothes is relative, you got to have that, but you know what, if you don't have the best or whatever, as long as you have clean, you're good. But shelter and food, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Another thing for me was I did not want to start out as a single parent.
Didn't care.
You know, you know what?
Didn't care.
I remember I was 22 years old and living in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And I used to hang out with women that were much older than me. They were like in their 40s. I was like the baby in the group because we were all housekeepers. And I was the baby in the group. And I would listen to this one particular woman say she wants to find a man just to have a child. She didn't care about the relationship or anything like that. And I'm thinking, how is she going to do that? Because I am young in my thought process of I'm afraid to do this. I don't know if I'll be good at doing this. And here she is, saying, I just want a child. And to me and my thinking, that was foreign because my mother was a single parent. Although my father was just 2 minutes away and he was there, for me, but I did not want that. I did not want that for me as a start. I ended up being a single parent because I got divorced and, two people are not on the same page, but I did not want to start out that way.
I think for me, let me clarify. It's not about being a single parent. I wanted a family. I wanted a relationship.
Right.
I just didn't want to get married.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a matter of finding somebody and having children and that was it. No, I wanted a family. And I wanted that stability. I just didn't want to get married. And fortunately, as I said, for me, I found that. And I found my life partner. But being a single parent is tough. And that was not an option. And hopefully it's not, your situation was created and that does happen as well.
Right.
People don't start out that way, but through circumstances and changes and, you end up that way. But yeah, that wasn't the option either. I wanted the stability of a family.
I tell you a story that seems so silly now, but in my struggle, I knew I would not be a mother in my 20s. I knew that, but I had put age 35 to be the age, a cutoff to be a mother. And of course I went beyond that, but in my struggle, I sought counseling. I told you I went to the parenting class, to learn about, and when you go to parenting class here in America and they're teaching you about being a parent, it's very different from what you see in Jamaica, right? It's very different. So here I am learning about parenting the American way with my island sensibilities, and trying to mesh it together. And after that parenting class, I said, you know what, I need to really speak to someone because this is a big thing for me, And then I went home to Jamaica. And my father pulled me aside and he said, what are your plans?
Oops.
I said, I'm going to go back to college and finish the degree that I started. And he said, no, I don't hear you talk about a family of your own. What are your plans? And I said, I didn't have an answer, because by that time I had stuffed it so far back, and whatever I had to do to not get pregnant or whatever, that I just didn't want to have a discussion about it, and then on my way back to the United States, I was thinking about it, after I had a glass of wine on the plane, because I was thinking about it and I'm like, he really wants a grandchild from me or he wants to see me with my own family, right? And so when I got back into the United States, I scheduled, a counseling session, therapy, to go speak to this woman about whatever it is. And then she started going off into, the rest of my life. And I did not want to really talk about that because, I came in to speak about this narrow issue, which is, my fear, my hesitation to be a mother. And then one day I went there and I was just tired. I'm like, I'm not going back there. And because I was like, she's going too deep. It's like a deep dive now into my life. And, I'm from the islands. We don't deep dive.
We don't talk about that. We don't air none of that. Leave it alone.
Things. I am a lot more comfortable talking about it today, because of the experience and living here for a long time. But, I went to the last session with her and she said to me, why don't you lie on the couch? And I would never lie on that couch before. So I said, okay, because I'm done. So I leaned back, on the couch. And then she said, okay, so let's go over your mother and this. And I closed my eyes and I said, she said, where do you see yourself? And I said, with a suitcase in my hand. And she goes, where are you going? I said, I'm going out the door. And I'm thinking, this is my last session with this lady because I am not coming back here. I am not coming back here to dig like this. We stay around the parameter in our life.
Talk about what we're supposed to talk about. Let's not talk about all the other stuff.
Because she wants to knit. How did I come to be so afraid of something that happens so naturally for people? Because a lot of women, young girls, grow up knowing that they want to be mothers and nothing is going to get in the way of that, right? And for me, something was getting in the way of that, which was my fear. So, the day when I left her office, and I got in the elevator, I burst out laughing. I'm like, this lady don't know that I'm not coming back.
I'm done. I'm done with you.
She called my house and she goes, you should come back. You need it.
No, you need it. Didn't know then.
I never went back. I never went back to see her. But I would watch other people, how they mothered. When I was a living housekeeper, the lady was really a really great mother. When I was a living housekeeper, and I would watch how she mothered her child. It was the first one, and I went there when she was 7 months, 6 or 7 months, little. And I would just watch her. And then on my day off, I was in 2 Jewish households, one that was kosher and one was non-kosher. So I would watch to see how both parent their children, right? The modern household versus the traditional household, how they both parent their children. And I realized that as a mother, equally, you want what's best for your children, no matter how you get it done in your house from one house to the other. So I said, okay, I have to start thinking now, what would that mean for me, And so I started to let in more and more. And when I went to years passed by and I went to this other therapist because I'm not afraid to go get help. I got to a place where I'm not afraid to go get help. Before I was, because I was like, we don't talk about my mama. We don't talk about my father. We don't talk about where I come from. Just stay on the outside, And so, as the years went by, I started to see the value in counseling. Yeah. And I walked into, this was another therapist who felt like my grandmother. She was older, Italian, and she would share her stories with me. And then I said to her, I shared with her my fear and everything. And she said to me, I think you are reacting to your mother's life, not living your own life. Right? And of course, I was like early 30s then, about just early 30s, before I was 35. And she said, I think you're reacting to your mother's life, not living your life, not allowing yourself to live your life. And I said, you know what, you're right. Because I think back along the way, I would stop and say, where was my mother at this age? Where was my mother at that age? Instead of just moving through life and saying, this is where I'm at. I'm doing really great, and I can take on this challenge, and then at some point I decided to be a mother, and it was very challenging because it's later in life.
Yeah.
And it was very challenging. The story of how my one child came here after miscarriages and ectopics and, all kind of stuff that I fall into.
Age brings on, yeah, the age thing brings
Yeah.
on a whole nother set of dynamic
Mm-hmm.
that now you have to deal with. And it was really funny because I was talking to somebody the other day and they said to me, do you realize that over the age of 34, they call you a geriatrics pregnancy? And I'm like, what? I didn't even know there was such a thing. I'm like, what is that? And yeah, if you're over the age of 34, because by then you've supposedly lost more than half your eggs and now you're struck. And I'm like, what is that? But it's real. It's crazy.
When I decided to go for it, I was married at that time, and I was in a really comfortable place, where I felt like I traveled. I used to travel. I would, because I did not have any children, I would just get up and go. I would get up and go. I would leave work. A couple of times I left work in the evening at 5 o'clock, and I was on a plane at Kennedy, 10 p.m. to London. I would hit Jamaica. I was just living life for me because I didn't have anything to stop me or to hold me back. And then at some point I decided, I thought about adoption. I've always had a dream to adopt. And then I said, I was married at the time, and he's like, why don't you go for it, And I said, you know what? Yeah, we bought a house, and I kind of started thinking about the little feet running around on the hardwood floor, the little pitter patter, or just something to be responsible for more than my nieces and whatever it is, going to volunteer or whatever it is. And then by that time, it was more challenging to actually end up having one child is really a blessing, really, really a blessing, because I started out with three, and she was the one that made it. So it's really, really a blessing for me. We'll fall into what they call the 10%. Another thing, talking about geriatric, making decision to be a mother, and they call you geriatric. I found there was a lot of pressure on me when I was pregnant to do the amnio, to test to see if the child will be a Down syndrome baby. Every time I went for testing, they started ramping up your testing at 28 weeks, right? And it was just a lot of testing the fat at the back of the baby's neck and all kind of stuff. One time I went for testing, and they said, oh, we see an issue with her heart. I had to go to a heart specialist. They do a 3D and found that there's nothing wrong. She just has an extra muscle in her heart. It was a lot of pressure because I was at that age, and I had a very good insurance. I had very good insurance because my insurance gave us up to $100,000, of benefits at the time. 50 for me, 50 for a father, to whatever we had to do, right? So they knew, but there was a lot of pressure for me to do what they're telling me to do because of my age. They were also looking for me to have diabetes, gestational diabetes. Nothing. I had nothing. I was in great health. I didn't have any morning sickness. I didn't have any diabetes. I had some acid reflux. I worked up until 8 days before I gave birth to this child, right? So every time I went, it's like they were looking for something, one.
I don't know. I don't even know the point of doing all of that because, when I had my second child, I was 32. And it was the same sort of thing, right? I was 32, and they were telling me I had to do all these things. 33, and I got to the point where I did 2 ultrasounds, and then they wanted to do the amniotic sac test, and I said no, and they said, well, there could be this, there could be that, and I said, listen, it doesn't matter what it is, we're going to deal with it. So we ain't going to go poking, prodding at this poor child. Leave the child alone. Let the child be. Because it didn't matter to me. It didn't matter if there were any of these issues.
Yeah.
We were going to go with it. We were going to deal with it. And whatever happened would happen. But yeah, I find that very stressful. And it causes extra stress that is really not necessary. And if you have a mother who decides that if the child is A, B, C, or D, then we don't want to carry on the pregnancy. That's a different story. But if you ask and somebody says, no, I really don't care, I'm good, then leave people alone, right? So it's all about making these personal decisions. You've already made the decision to have a child. You're later in your life. So
Mm-hmm.
whatever you need to do to stay well and then have this baby, and whatever this child comes with, you just face it and deal with it. But everybody seems to be afraid of the what if.
Yeah.
And why bother?
What was interesting is while I'm being told that they're checking for Down syndrome, they're also telling me that doing the amnio could mean that I have a miscarriage.
Exactly.
I'm like,
Exactly.
here I am. So I said to my doctor at the time, I said, listen, this is final. Whatever comes, we'll deal with it.
Mhm.
Right.
Absolutely.
And just
Because
try,
you're jeopardizing it. You're
yeah, because,
jeopardizing your pregnancy by
yeah,
doing all these things. You've already waited this long to do it, and they're jeopardizing. Why bother? It's just stop it. It's just
first of all, I had to go in every week. Every week after 28 weeks, I had to go in every week for the ultrasound. They're looking at this, looking at that. And I'm like, oh, right. You know how many hours I clock waiting in the waiting room? It's
and
like,
how much water you drank.
listen to this. One time I went in for my weekly checkup, and then he's like, you have to go to the hospital now. I think you're having contractions. And I said, I don't feel a thing. Right. So they had me go from the doctor's office to the hospital, and they kept me there for 4 hours, testing me. I saw the bill. It was $4,000.
They were
Then I had
living off of you.
then
They
I
were
had
making money.
then I had to go back the next day, right? Because it was a 2-part treatment. They said they gave me steroids. It was a 2-part treatment, and they billed the next day at $600. So that was 4,600 and something dollars, right? And then I go home and nothing happened. So I'm like, did they stop the contraction that I was not feeling? Right? So it's big business too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big business, and because they know you have insurance. I mean, here in Canada it's a little different. You're not paying directly for those things. Yes, if there's additional things, if you have insurance, it will pay for it. But
Right.
a lot of the general tests that they do is already covered through our health insurance.
Right.
But my thing always is, even though I'm not paying out of pocket, why am I doing things that I don't need to do?
Yeah.
Because for somebody who really needs to have these things done, then at least leave the money and let them be able to take care of it.
Right.
So it's very stressful, but it's one of those things. And like I said, if people do want to do it,
Mm-hmm.
then by all means, it's there, and you should, if it gives you that sense of comfort, right?
Right.
But if it's just a matter of poking and prodding,
Uh-huh.
I think if personally the mother is healthy and well, then I
Mm-hmm.
don't think we have to have any fear of any of those things, right? We don't have to have any fear at all of being sick. I mean, the one thing that I monitored during both my pregnancies was um, gestational diabetes, because
Right.
diabetes runs in the family on a
Mm-hmm.
regular basis. I didn't have it, but I had a sister who developed it during her pregnancy. So I was very conscious of that. So my doctor made sure she checked me for that all the time. And that was really it.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of that, there really wasn't anything else at that point to sort of give yourself a headache over. And like you said, every time they poke and prod at you, some of these things are endangering your child. So why bother?
Of course. I mean, um, I thought about having a second child after that one, and I was like, no, I'm done. I'm just not going through this anymore.
Stressful. It's too stressful, and listen, I always say being a mother is a choice that everybody should make individually.
Yes.
And when we see people at a certain age and they're not pregnant, we always ask us, so when are you having a baby? So when are you? We don't know if they're having trouble having a baby. We don't know if they just don't want to have a baby and just don't want to talk about it. we have no idea what's going on. And so we create more anxiety asking these questions. And it's a question we need to stop asking.
Yeah.
We need to stop going into people's lives like that and asking them these questions, because we create all kinds of anxiety that we're not even aware of.
Right.
Right. But, and I mean, miscarriages is a huge thing. It's more popular than we even think, because people also don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Right. So
Mm-hmm.
because people don't talk about it, you don't know. And I remember when I had my miscarriage and I would talk freely about it. And I had friends who were terrified to say anything to me because they were worried that it was going to make me upset. And I kept thinking, I knew people for years. And then when I started talking to them, they said, oh, I had one too. And I went, what? And I'm like, and I had two or I had three. And I'm like, what? And how do you survive not talking about this?
Because even today in the papers, when I was reading, one of the comments was, is everything for social media? And I said, I understand that comment. But at the same time, if somebody wants to share their story about infertility, why not? Because I was of the belief that, Black women are fertile and we don't have infertility issues, because I really didn't know anyone who did until I started to focus within my family. And I realized that, yes, there are people who did, right? And so I happened to find this really, really great doctor. I will not forget him. He's Canadian, but he lives in the United States, Dr. Gregory Zapantis. I will not forget him. After I was going through, miscarriages and the ectopic and everything, and I scheduled an appointment and I happened to meet him. And where I met him at Montefiore Hospital here in New York. And I went to see him the next time and he said, I have to tell you that I'm leaving. And I said to him, wherever you go, I'm coming. Because at that time, I started to get some answers from him and he started to do some tests on me, and then he determined that, they just couldn't find out what was happening for me because I fall into that 10% of women. But the one thing I really remember and connected with him was how compassionate he was. He was he's still here in New York, very compassionate. So I went with him to where he went to at the infertility clinic. And that is where I stayed until, I conceived with, of course, my beautiful child today,
Yeah.
and I'm glad that I did.
I think it's a huge thing. And I really honestly applaud people who talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I talked about it, people said to me, you talk about it so freely. And my thing too was I was able to sort of pick myself up after that situation. And I recognized that not everybody's able to do that as well. So
Right.
it becomes another huge roadblock. And then there's the fear of doing it again, and
Yeah.
the fear that you might lose your child again. And there's all of those things, right? But I tell you, over the years, and even I there's a young woman in my village who I applaud her every day. Love her, love her. And she has gone through the journey of infertility and, all the different process to get to having a child. And she finally got pregnant. She did the in vitro and everything. And she lost her baby at almost 9 months. He
Mm-hmm.
was a stillborn. And I cried for her. It was the hardest thing, but she picked herself up, and she's a teacher. So she started writing, and she would write these letters to him, and she would just writing about her feelings, and she posted it on Facebook. And it was so well received because a lot of people just applauded her because she was so vocal
Yeah.
about the whole journey. And it helped her in her healing, and
Yeah.
it helped to minimize her fears. And thank God she had a second bout of in vitro, and she had a second child, and she has a second son. He's almost a year. He's the sweetest thing. And she still writes about it. She still posts. Up to yesterday, she posted that this weekend, passed would have been Happy Bereavement Mother's Day.
Right.
And I reposted it on my social media because I think it's important to honor these mothers. It's important to say, I see you. It's
Yeah.
important to stand in the gap for them and give them all the support, because it's a huge journey and it's painful. It's
Yes.
very painful,
Yes.
and if you have a child afterward, you celebrate all of that, but you never forget. You
No.
never forget.
I
You
mean,
never forget.
we have to have another conversation around that, because you know how Savannah came here. And, I started out with triplets. And when I went to one of my appointments, the doctor told me that the twins' heartbeat stopped. And I thought, how is this going to work out now? Because here she was by herself, and then I had the twins in a sack by themselves. Granted, it's in the first trimester, but how is this going to work? But it happened early enough where I could proceed. And when I gave birth to her, my doctor said immediately, this is a sack for the twins, because, it was still there.
Still there. Yeah.
So every time I look at my daughter, I see the miracle that she is, and a blessing that she's brought upon our lives, with her special self. But, and when I try to tell, especially when I try to tell someone from Jamaica, how she came here, they're like, what? What? I don't. Well, this lady, she said, I don't understand. And I said, I don't know how to explain it to you. That's the dish. How am I going to explain it to you, right? Yeah. It's so confusing to them. And I said, one day I will just, together have a conversation about the road to, I have a story that I write here called For the Love of Savannah. The journey to get into Savannah, but it's hilarious when you're trying to tell someone that.
And they can't relate.
They can't
relate. And I find too, people who can get pregnant like that and have children, they can't relate to that either, right? So it's a real journey. It's a real journey, and it's a journey, and like I said, it's a real journey to motherhood, right? First you have to decide, then you have to hope and pray that everything happens naturally. And thank God if it doesn't, then you have options, right? Yeah. And so, I mean, I remember back in the, I think, 70s and 80s in Canada, that in vitro treatment was not covered under the health insurance. And it cost people a lot of money. I had a friend who mortgaged her house. So it was huge.
I'll tell you, between out of pocket, because the first insurance we had did not cover a lot of the cost. So between the first and the second, it was over $40,000.
Oh, easy.
Yeah, it was very expensive. Very
it's
expensive.
Easy. Oh yeah, it's a very expensive process. And so at least in Canada, they've decided that there's certain things that they'll cover. So for a lot of people, I think it's since probably the 80s, late 80s, early 90s that they've been covering it, which is amazing, because it's an option. And now what it basically would mean is, if you can't afford it, then you can't afford to have children. And that would be truly a truth, right? If you can't afford it, you can't afford to have children, because you no longer could take those options, right? So I think it's amazing that there's that recognition that it is an option for people. Let's help them to at least have those options, even if they're not financially able, because now they can take care of their child, but they can't do the process. Yeah. So I think it's very good that they're covering it.
One of the the things that I'm very grateful for, and that is when I brought Savannah home to meet my father. Yeah, and her father took a picture of them together, and I'm so glad I have it, and I could see his face,
Finally have your own family.
Yeah, his face just lights up, and I was like, Pop, I can't wait for her to sit on the cedar bench with you and have conversations. I mean, that did not happen because he passed, but just to see his face lights up, tells me that I've accomplished something that he really wanted for me. And to see, how much I put into being a mother, because I take that job very seriously. It's very serious for me. Anybody knows me knows I don't take that job lightly, you know, to be a mother. And I'm glad that it ended up later for me, because I was able to do a lot for myself before she came, right? So whatever I have to do for her now, it doesn't feel like I am sacrificing my entire life. I still do make sacrifices, but I can also look back and say, boy, my 20s was good, or this was good, right? And now I can devote this much time to her. So there are times when she come downstairs and she says, Mom, can I have a hug? And I don't ask what's going on. I just give it to her, because I'm like, these are the moments that I live for. Yeah.
Absolutely. Listen, my kids are grown. And we are very close. And I'll tell you a funny story too. And I posted it on my Facebook page, and I have a dearest cousin, and he called me and he goes, "What was that?" Because a lady said to me one day at work, she goes, "Are you really that close to your children?" And I kind of initially thought, that's an odd question. So I said to her, "Aren't you close to your children?" And she said, "Well, not the way you talk about how close you are to your kids. Are you really that close? When you post stuff on Facebook and Instagram, is it real?" And it kind of took me aback, and I thought, it's not even worth explaining. So I walked away.
Yeah.
But as I thought about it that night, I thought, really, that's kind of an odd question. But for her, it wasn't. But for me, I had to tell her the next day when I went back to work. I said, no, I really am that close to my children. And I really do get along very well with my children. And even though they're grown people with their own families, I am super close with my kids, and so I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
And I said to somebody the other day, if I have done nothing as a mother, I am so grateful that to this day my children listen to me.
Yeah.
They will come to me with whatever questions or whatever they want, and we will talk, and I will give them my opinion. And it's okay if they don't agree, but we sit down and we talk about it, and I make sure that they've thought about everything to come to the decision that they want to make.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And a lot of times, and they will come, and they know that even if I don't agree, there's no judgment. It's
Right.
unconditional.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to say to them down the road, "Oh, I told you so,"
Right.
because they're grown. And I also don't believe that you need to make your own mistakes. So if I think it's something you're really going to bomb on, I'm going to tell you straight up.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to tell you, I told you so. Yeah. But in general, I don't. Yeah. I allow them to do that. But once we sit down 9 times out of 10 and we have that conversation, they will come back and they say, Mom, I'm glad I talked to you. I'm really glad we had that conversation. And now I can rethink. And yes, I'm deciding that I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And so I'm grateful for that. I think, their father and I raised 2 amazing people. And though now that he's not here, the one thing that constantly goes through all our minds is, if Daddy was here, what would he say about this?
Yeah.
What do you think he'd say about that? And if they have to make decisions as well, they're thinking to the next level to say, my dad would think this, or he would say that. And they will talk about it with each other. Mm-hmm. And they'll call me and say, well, what do you think Daddy would have said about this? And I said, well, for all the things you know about him, what do you think he would have said?
Yeah. And
9 times out of 10, they can come up with, we sit there and we laugh because we know how he thinks. After 43 years, you kind of know.
I totally understand that, because in my sometimes when I struggle with things, I will say, well, what would Pop say? And one of the things that Pop would always say to me is, Annette, don't worry yourself. Right. And that kind of is a voice, that soft voice will kind of just calm me, and make me think, okay, let it go for a minute, let it go. And when I do that, I come to a place of rest and I can think about other things. So I completely understand that. Well, my cousin, this is a very interesting conversation. I know we'll be back here talking more about motherhood. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule this evening to come and chat with us, with me, and have a great evening. And thank you. I love you. I love you. I love you.
You do the same. Love you. Have a good one.